Well, welcome everybody. I'm just getting a last couple things set up here. I'm happy that you are able to join me either in person during this live event or perhaps on the replay. That's the beauty of this kind of technology, that we get a chance to connect sometimes, weeks after the event, and still always have the opportunity of being able to learn something yet again. For those of you who are new to my work, I'm Mary Jo Feely. I am the owner of Fourth Dimension Healing in Stillwater, Minnesota, and I have an energy and crystal healing practice. I am a Usui Reiki master teacher. I'm a certified and accredited healing touch practitioner, and I also work with other modalities such as light language, and also offer mentoring and courses in a variety of topics. So at the end, we may get back to some of that, but for now, I simply just am so happy that you're able to join me. The other thing that I have offered, and it's been really came out of COVID, is how to provide coursework when we were all locked down. And so I created an online school, the Center for Crystal and Healing Studies, and I have a variety of courses. Some are free minute courses, some are in-depth courses, and perhaps we'll talk about that a little bit more later. I have placed within the chat window some of the links for my online shop and my school. I also have a podcast, and sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm driving, I like to listen to podcasts. And so it was about a year ago, perhaps, that I decided that there was a format that I had been getting requests for. And so you will be able to take a listen to my podcast and learn about self-care and energy healing and crystal healing, all kinds of ways that we can nurture ourselves. And each of my podcasts also include a guided meditation so that you can actually experience and integrate what you're learning with your own personal body, mind, spirit needs that are presenting. A couple housekeeping things that I want to let you know about. The first is that if you are currently watching the live stream, you will be able to access the chat window. So feel free to go ahead and put any chats in, and that chat window is not publicly published after I set up the replay. The replay goes public without any of that more chat conversation. I'm just going to tell you that I think we've dodged a storm here in Minnesota, at least where I currently am. If on the outside chance anything were to change and I lose power, I will amend and augment the conversation, and you'll be able to see that on the replay. So anyway, one of the things that I really appreciate during these conversations, either if it's directly during the chat or somebody follows up with me afterwards, is when they can give me an opportunity to be mindful of something that I missed. And one of the things that was brought to my attention is that in my last month video, I was talking about and demonstrating how to create a crystal grid, working with quartz crystals and programming those quartz crystals to be aligned with the various elements of earth, fire, water, wind, and storm. And that's all fine and good. And it was brought to my attention that as I was creating the grid, I was out of my camera range. And so I wanted to take a minute right away, as I typically do, to revisit any questions that came up from last month. And then we'll move on to the new questions that have been coming in. So last month, I was talking about how we can work with quartz to program the quartz. And the programming is, in a sense, setting an intention into the crystalline structure of the quartz. And here is a piece of quartz. And there are ways that we can intentionally do that. And in this particular conversation that I was having last month, we were working with the elements. And I'm going to just show you the quartz points again. Now, it's very possible that I'm going to do this perhaps in a little different way than I did last time, and that's just fine. So this is a piece of quartz that I have programmed to resonate with the earth element energy. And if you're new to my work and new to, I guess I would say, the system that I work with for elements, I have other videos and you can always take a peek and learn more about those. And I have actually a podcast about that as well. So this is earth resonance. This is has been programmed so that it resonates with fire. And I have them marked, a little piece of tape, because there's not necessarily a way I'm going to remember all this, and it's okay to put a little piece of tape or something like that on your stones. This is for water. This is wind. And this is storm. So how I guess I would suggest, and again, it may look totally different than last month. What I want to do, and I'm going to check my camera. Yes, it looks good. Just moving a couple things out of the way. So I typically start with earth, and then I move to fire, water, wind, and storm. And that's how I'm actually going to lay this out. Now, quartz has a hexagonal structure, so it's six-sided. And so I like to work with 6 quartz whenever I am working with grids. And here is the 6th we'll get to in just a minute. So I am choosing right now to create this grid, in a sense, in a pentagram or a 5-star geometry. The same geometry, if you take an apple and slice it sideways and look at the core and the way the seeds lay out and the way that little membrane that protects and holds the seeds, you've got a pentagram. So these are geometries that we see all the time in nature. They're sometimes are referred to as sacred geometry. Sacred with a small s, okay? So I'm going to put this as if it's pointing at the very top of the star, and that's the earth. And then I'm going to bring fire over here. And so far I'm still in camera range. That's good. Water. Wind. And storm. So this is a 5-pointed pentagram grid working with these elements. Now we could certainly have them turned around and directed inward as well. And I have talked about that in other videos about the direction of the quartz point or any stone or crystal that's been shaped into an elongated point, either naturally as these occur, or maybe they've been shaped by humans or by machine, then that's the direction the energy is going to flow. And for right now, I want these energies of these 5 elements to be able to expand outward. And because, as I mentioned, I like to work with the 6th, I have this is really one of my favorite pieces of quartz. And one of the things, if you'll notice, is it is not water clear. This water stone is pretty clear, but this one isn't, and it has all kinds of different minerals in there, and it's got some twinning, and it's got on the inside, you could almost see like there's another crystal that's embedded within this one. And I love it that it's got a really flat bottom, because that brings the 6th quartz into this particular grid. So this is what I had intended to show you last month, and I believe that I had most of it cut off, so my apologies. So that is just a follow-up, and I hope that makes sense. If not, go ahead and send me a chat, or you can always reach out to me afterwards. You can send me an email. You can chat actually right through my website. Don't be surprised if I chat right back. If I'm online, it may be that I'm able to just respond to you fairly quickly. So don't let that kind of startle you too much, okay? So great. So you can't see a lot of the rocks that I have here, but I have a lot of crystals and gemstones that I have gathered for this time together. And one of the first ones that the questions I got was really, really a very interesting question. And it came from somebody who has been working with crystals for a while and is beginning to understand the various types of gemstones and crystals and their properties, which is really great because it helps this person be able to select gemstones and crystals that are going to be able to support them. So the question that was presented is, I travel for my work and am looking for some grounding stones that are not super heavy. Do you have any suggestions? So that's a really good question. So when we think about stones that are grounding, and we think about the word ground, and we use that word all the time when we're talking about the earth, that we are talking about stones that at least part of their qualities are going to be qualities that resonate with the earth element. So it is that ability to kind of remind us that we're human beings, we have a physical body, and we need to be kind of like where we are. We have to be attentive. We want to be present. We don't want to be off in la la land unless perhaps we're in deep prayer or meditation. Then we would want to be able to shift into a different kind of part of our being. But this question says, I travel, I'm looking for some grounding stones, but I don't want them too heavy. When I think of too heavy, one of the first things that comes to my mind is a stone like hematite or hematite, and that is iron ore, and that's just pretty darn heavy. And so this person doesn't want that. And so I was really grateful for the question because there are some ways that we can take a look at stones that resonate with the earth element, resonate perhaps with some of the other elements too, to soften it a little bit, okay? So one of the stones that I thought could be really helpful, and one that I would recommend, is unakite or unakite jasper. Now, jaspers are a form of quartz. And when I say that, I'm going to grab a quartz again. Quartz, rock crystal, is silicon dioxide. So it shows up in a lot of different stones, and it shows up a lot in jaspers. And jaspers, if you want to think of it this way, in a way, a form of opaque quartz. And it tends to show up in greens and reds and yellows. And out of those colors, you start to get some other blending of colors. And the reason I really like unakite, let me turn it over this way, you might be able to see. Sometimes it's not the easiest to see with my camera. And you can perhaps notice that there is a green hue and more of a red orangish hue. And what that's doing is pulling up energies from the earth. And in my experience, I describe it as having two types of energy that come up from the earth. One of them is this vital life force energy that we really benefit from when we are energetically depleted, we're worn out. That's the sort of earth energy that we can really benefit from. And then there is another type of earth energy. It is very nurturing. I think of beautiful, soft green moss. I mean, it's that real nurturing kind of softness, yet it makes that connection with the earth. That's what I noticed about the unakite or unakite jasper, is that it pulls up both of those hues, both of those types and frequencies of earth energy. And so here we have a grounding stone. It's not too heavy. And also I would say is whenever we start having grounding stones, so they're earth stones that have green in them, they are also going to be bringing that energy up into the heart chakra. And the heart chakra here in the beautiful center of our heart is really where we do our healing. It is really where it's all at. We want to be able to connect with this deep sense of loving kindness, compassion, patience. And when you think about being in those states, it really does activate the heart chakra and the energetics within the heart space. And so that's a beautiful stone for that soft grounding approach. Another stone, again, kind of picks up that same theme of the greens, and then the reds of the earth is ruby fuchsite. So we have some ruby. Here's an example. There we go. You can see it a little bit there. So that ruby is connecting with that vital energy. And we also have this beautiful, almost like it's like a mica, very soft type of fuchsite that is going to be resonating with water. And it's going to be able to bring in that balanced earth energy. That water is calming and it helps to soften the earth a bit. Sometimes, I'll be honest, I get my videos a little mixed up, and I either have done a rock talk video or will be soon to publish a rock talk video on ruby fuchsite. So if you're not familiar with the rock talk videos, you can access them certainly through my YouTube channel. I have some playlists right on the homepage of my channel, so you can find whatever you may be interested in. And the rock talk videos are typically somewhere around 5 or 6 or 7 minutes long. And it's just a real quick little video about a number of different stones. And so you can find a lot of them. And if I have not published that, it will be coming out within the next week or so. And you can also access it through some social media. So that would be another earth stone that's not so terribly heavy, but yet it would be great if you're traveling, especially if you're traveling for work. When you think about that, you're dealing with the hustle and bustle of the travel process, and then you are dealing with your accommodations, and you are syncing up with perhaps coworkers and others that you work with in a different format. So I can see that you would definitely benefit from having some kind of active work and intention around the grounding piece with some stones. The third one I want to talk with you about is serpentine. Serpentine you can't, of course, feel it, but it's pretty light. And serpentine is a stone that resonates with the earth energy. And what it does is it very much like we would expect to see the snake coiling up, perhaps a pole, or the way it slithers in that kind of spiraling shape. This is what goes on with the serpentine. It brings gentle earth energy up and moves it through all of the chakras. And you've heard me reference the hanging behind me, which is really an example of the energy centers, the 7 chakras that we are pretty familiar with. There are other chakras that don't show up here, but this is one that it's a 7 chakra model that we do work with quite a bit in the West. So we've got the root, and that's pretty much what we're talking about with the grounding piece, okay? Then as we move up into the different chakras, we're actually moving up through our physical body till we go out the very top of our head with our crown chakra. And so this serpentine could be really helpful for kind of establishing that connection with the earth and the flexibility and that kind of weaving that a snake may do as it moves up with energetically through the chakras will help to bring that balance slowly up through all of your chakras. So you not only feel grounded, you're less likely to be thrown off course if your travel arrangements don't go quite as well, or maybe the transportation didn't get you to the Airbnb or the hotel on time. We are able to be a little bit more present again to whatever's arising. So that would be my recommendation for 3 grounding stones that you could consider, especially if you're looking for something that's not terribly heavy. Okay, so I'm going to set this one aside. I have another question here, and this one's been fun because I've been really sorting this out, and I have some notes. So you may see me looking down here at my notes because I do not want to miss talking about some of the things that I came up with. So this question came in actually at the end of last month, and so I've just been wanting to really give some thought to it. And the question is, I have often wanted to ask you if you have any thoughts about Larimar, that lovely sky blue marbled and white Caribbean stone. So the reason I wanted to be really intentional about making sure that I have some of the nuts and bolts aligned with this stone is that this is a gemstone that I do not currently carry. I'm actually going to be going to the Denver Rock Show next month, and so I'm hoping to find some Larimar. And so this is a piece that I have on loan from another healer that I wanted to show it to you. And I'm going to actually try to move it a little closer and see if this is going to help. Sometimes it is really tricky, especially with the various lighting that I've got going on. So Larimar comes out of the Dominican Republic, and it is only found in one place in the world. This in here, I'm going to actually look at my notes because there's just a lot of science in here and I just don't want to goof things up. So Larimar is a blue, they call it pectolite. Pectolite. And pectolite is typically going to be more like whites and grays. And it's a form of feldspar, and feldspar is very common. In fact, it's probably the most common rock on the planet. And perhaps somebody will put in a question sometime about the different types of rocks that we have and what's this type versus that type. But for now, just know that this is a feldspar, very, very, very common feldspar. Larimar actually comes out of volcanic activity. So whenever we hear volcano, we think fire. And so this is a stone that resonates with the fire element. It also, and I think as this question states, it's this lovely sky blue marble with white Caribbean stone. So we think of the Caribbean and we think of these beautiful beaches and these beautiful waters. So there's the water element too. So we've got this fire water blending, and Larimar actually is a stone that can really actually balance the fire water polarity. And I want to explain that a little bit more. So when we think about a teeter-totter, right, as kids, so we've got fire on one side, and actually the opposite end of the polarity of fire is water. And so in order to balance fire and water within our body, within our lived experience, we have to have something right in the middle at that fulcrum point. Earth is always going to balance. And so that's why I always go back to Earth. If we're feeling too much fire, we're hot, or maybe we have some hot anger, maybe we're super, super busy, super active. That's all of that kind of fiery energy. On the other end of our polarity is the water. Water is very calm and soothing. It can be very, very emotional. Think of when we cry, we don't cry droplets of fire, do we? We cry droplets of water. And so sometimes if we're too watery, we might be really sad. We might be really overly emotional. So to get that balance back, we can work with an earth stone. So we could work with, where do they go? We could work with the unakite jasper, right? And get that balance point. Larimar will balance that polarity on its own because it holds both. And when I have been working with actually this particular stone, because, and you can find other videos about how to work with stones, it's important that you work with the stone to be able to connect with it and allow it to intuitively offer some information. And what I really connected with this particular stone, this piece of Larimar, was this sense of being active and also balancing that with being of service. And it's as if there's this active part of it and the nurturing part of it. And that's what I thought was so amazing about the Larimar. Now, Larimar is pricey. Larimar is the trade name for blue pectolite. And as I mentioned, it comes out of one particular location in the Dominican Republic, and it is Barahona in the DR, Dominican Republic. And that particular town, Barahona, is on the south side of the country, and it is about midway between both east and west coastlines. I was also, as I was investigating and looking into Larimar, sound like, as I saw some reports, maybe it was even last year, there had been a fire at the mine, and it had been temporarily closed down to make sure that the facility was safe. I'm not sure if it's been opened or not. So anytime we have a stone that comes perhaps from a certain particular area, or it's not as easily accessible or available, the price is going to go up. So watch for my online shop in the next month or so and see if it is something that I am able to find. But that is the Larimar. So it's got that hot volcanic activity, yet it has this watery elemental energy as well. It has sodium, calcium, silicone, and oxygen. So it is a calcium sodium silicate. And it is actually, there's so much science to it. If you really want to learn about this or any stone, I would encourage you to go to MinDOT. So it's www.min.dat. It will take you straight to a geology page about all kinds of stones, their chemical composition, their specific gravity. This particular stone tends to be about a 4.5 to 5 on the Mohs hardness scale. So it's kind of right in the middle, but a little bit on the soft side. So that is the Larimar. So working with it to support both activity and nurturing. That's going to be the key piece that I would say, in my experience, that it can be really helpful with. Okay, so I hope that answered this person's question. And of course, as always, reach out if you have more clarifying questions. I can always follow up again next week. It's just such a beautiful stone to bring in that sense of inner peace, even when we might be in a really kind of intense time. Because if we're in an intense time, it's also a very active time, which means fire might be a little bit overboard, so we can bring that back. So I don't know about you, but as I talk about these stones and I learn about stones, it's always like opening my mind to say, oh, that sounds like a stone that I could really benefit from. So anyway, that is a little bit on Larimar, and I'm really hoping to be able to have some to show you next month. The next question I have, and this has come up from time to time, and I think it's always a great question to have, is the question is, I'm new to all this. How does crystal healing work? And oh, wow. See, now that's another whole can of worms too, isn't it? I would say there are a number of ways that it works. And let's go back to the Larimar. Let's say we know nothing about fire element. We know nothing about water element. We know nothing about where the Dominican Republic is. All we know is that when we hold this stone, we just have this sense of, oh, it's so beautiful. And I wish you could see it. Go out and Google Larimar, Larimar, so you can see some of these beautiful pictures. It's very difficult to photograph gemstones and crystals unless you have a real proper lighting. There's no way to be able to grasp that, but I would really encourage you to do this. So let's say that just simply looking at this, suddenly we start feeling better. We don't have to know that there is a chemical interaction that may very likely be happening within our energy system. We don't need to know that the fact that this is a fire and water stone, that it's going to help the nervous system and the emotional system. We don't have to worry about that. We just notice that, gee, this, oh my goodness, I feel so much more calm just by holding this stone. So that's one way. Another way is to be very clear on understanding the chemical composition. Now, in my crystal classes, particularly my advanced crystal healing course through my online school, and also through my crystal healer certification program, you do learn a lot about the chemical makeup because that is part of it. So let's say we are feeling like we are having lots of aches and pains with our muscles. It might not be surprising then that while we may soak our feet in Epsom salt, which is magnesium sulfate, or we may take a soak in a tub to soften up and loosen up our muscles, we can also work with stones that are magnesium bearing or manganese bearing in order to help support the physical and also the energetic shifts that take place within our body. Now, when we work with our healing, with crystal healing, we are working at a physical level, we're working at an emotional level, we're working at a mental level and a spiritual level. And so again, I'm just going to go back to the Larimar. We don't have to exactly know which part of our being is off. We may have a pretty good idea, but maybe not. But we can find a stone that helps us feel like we can calm down, that we can settle, that we can feel a little bit more balanced. And it doesn't matter if it happens to be iron ore and it's helping us get grounded. It doesn't matter if it happens to be a piece of quartz that helps to clear all the chakras. You know, it really comes down to how we experience working with the stone. When we're working with crystals for healing, intention is a big deal. Again, let's go back. Let me grab the unakite again. You've heard me talk about this if you've watched my other videos. Knowing the properties of this stone and going, oh, that's right, you will help me feel connected with the earth, not too heavy, so that I can get some nurturing. If I put that in my pocket, I will go out on a limb here and say pretty much what's going to happen is you're going to feel you have a rock in your pocket, because it's about intention. It's about being very mindful of the fact that this is a part of creation, just like you and me and maybe your pet kitty, your puppy, or your garden, or the birds that eat at your feeder. There's a role that we all play, and we are all interconnected. So the intention is important, so that we can be mindful of what is it that we are looking for healing. When I'm working with clients, you know, it's so easy for any of us, me included, if I go to see a healer and I see several healers to support me, because, you know, we all do healing. If it's so easy for me to want to just say, oh, fix me, because that's kind of the model that we are being raised in within the West when it comes to healthcare. Is that when something's wrong, we go to somebody and they help us get fixed. Now, as a nurse, I walk in both worlds. I walk in the world of allopathic Western medicine, and definitely there is a strong role for that. And I also walk in the role of complementary and alternative healthcare, which is where crystal healing and energy healing as well, but we're really talking crystal healing is going to fall. So it's about us asking for the help, being clear on what it is that we're looking for, and then being able to work with a variety of techniques and a variety of ways to be able to help support us. And so I hope that that kind of answers this question. Of course, you know, I could yak all day about how crystal healing works. But I think the important thing is that we recognize that we have a role in it. It's nothing magical. It is, there's a science behind it. There's a vibrational science behind it. And slowly science is catching up with those subtle energies. Subtle means we can't see them, but we can feel them, which is why when I held and meditated with this piece of Larimar, I had a sense of an intuition of what it was sharing with me. If you had this same piece, it would give you different information because you're a different person with different healing needs and different a different way of living. Okay, so I hope that answered that question. All right. Oh, good. Someone says it's helpful. Thanks. You bet. Glad to. I love doing this because it really helps to understand more. Okay, here is a stone that is kind of newer to my online shop, and it is Sunstone. And the question is, how can I use Sunstone for healing? So I wanted to show you Sunstone. Don't want to drop it. And again, it's a little hard to see. It's actually, I would say, an orangey peach. Some areas are a little bit darker than others. And this is, as its name implies, a stone that resonates with the fire element. And it's a strong fire element stone. And yet, in my experience, it isn't super, super hot. But when I worked with this stone, because I always like to work with the stones that I'm talking with you about, it had kind of like this really sparkly energy. It's almost like those little sparklers that we might see at 4th of July or some of these celebrations at maybe New Year's, but not quite as silver. It was more of a gold kind of sparkle that I was perceiving in my mind's eye, so it's got this kind of sparkly, and it also gave me this like can-do attitude kind of energy. So it's like, this would be the kind of stone that I would want to engage with, which means work with, set the intention with, be mindful about, to be able to perhaps move into some active energy and action that maybe I've been a little reluctant to do. So that kind of can-do attitude, it's a stone of leadership. So if you can imagine, and you probably at some point been in an experience where someone has nominated you to do something and you didn't really think you had it in you. You kind of thought you did, but it also made you a little bit nervous about, not so sure about this. Sunstone is the kind of stone that is going to give you that, yes, you can do this. Step into this leadership. I'm going to help you have some clarity around how you're going to do that in a way that's going to be helpful for you and for others. So that's an example, I would say, of the Sunstone. This is a little bit more durable than the Larimar, not quite as durable as quartz. This is at about a 6 or 6.5 on the Mohs hardness scale. And this also, because it's got this fiery active energy, is really great for the nervous system. It's great for the cardiovascular system. And when we think about it, the heart pumps blood, and that is a very, very active process. And the nervous system, wow, those neurons, all those little nerve cells are constantly literally firing impulses, one to the other, to the other, to the other, to get from the thought to the muscle moving to the ability to pick up a piece of sunstone. So it has this ability to affect the physical level of calming, perhaps calming down an overactive nervous system, calming down and balancing out a little bit too much of a cardiovascular system that might be a little bit running a little bit too hot. So those would be examples of how stone like this could be supportive. As always, and I've talked about it in other videos, and we touched even a little bit about it at the beginning, is that any of these gemstones and crystals you can work with as part of crystal grids. And I have other videos about that, and I have a course about crystal grids as well to help learn how to work with some of those geometrical patterns that show up in nature, and the geometrical properties and the chemical and healing properties of the gemstones and crystals to be able to create grids that can support an intention for yourself. Could be for a family, it could be for, let's say, a particular, maybe you're working on a project at work or at home and you really want to bring more intentional focus. It can be really helpful with that too, okay? So you can always explore more about that. So great question, and I sure hope that that answered it. So this question, this is, somebody's asking a question that's actually referencing a previous video. They don't ask, or they don't tell me exactly which video, but I think you'll get the idea. In one of your other videos, you talked about crystal clusters. Can you say more about how I could use them for healing? So again, I'm not sure if we even talked about that last month. They all blur together after a little bit. So I brought a couple of clusters to start with, and then we're going to talk about a couple others as well. So these are a couple clusters of amethyst. And a couple little shreds, little teeny pieces are dropping off. And the backside here, this is the matrix. This is where, if this was a geode, right, inside of, this would be on the outside, and then this is what we see on the inside when we open up that geode. So this is how the stone naturally grows. Sometimes if these fall off out of the matrix, then you're going to have individual little points. So this is amethyst. This one comes from Brazil. This is also amethyst. This is obviously much more pale. And I'm going to just turn it over so you can see that's the matrix. That would have been the outside of the geode. And so one of the things that I like to do with large clusters like this is I like to use them to help cleanse and clear and rebalance and help other gemstones reset. So for example, here's the Larimar. I'm going to just set that right there. Here's the Sunstone. I'm going to set that right there. Here's the Unakite. Ruby Fuchsite. I'm just going to grab the other one too. And this is serpentine. So we can use the amplification properties of the clusters. And in these cases, these are amethyst clusters, which are part of the quartz family, to help clear. And I would say any type of quartz cluster that you have, so quartz being clear quartz, it being amethyst, citrine, rose quartz, and smoky quartz. If you have any of those that are clusters, they can be really effective in cleaning off and clearing off the energetics. Now, ultimately, if left alone, the stones are going to reset. That's not a problem. They know how to do that. And sometimes if we want to be just gentle with them, we can just lay them on a cluster and they'll clear up. In fact, these two large clusters are actually some of the clusters that I have at my healing office for this exact reason. And many of the stones that I work with are laid on these clusters. So that's one example. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you, set these guys aside, kind of heavy, and they are fragile. You know, we want to be very careful with them so that we don't knock off the little points. And if they do, then that's okay. Now you have a little point that you can work with. Here are two other clusters. Amethyst again. And this is what's known as common citrine. So citrine, I just mentioned citrine is one of the quartz family members. This amethyst is an example of what happens when you take this amethyst and heat it up. It's going to turn kind of a golden brown, amber kind of color. It does not hurt the stone, but the properties change. So we have here in this particular cluster, we have this beautiful wind inspirational energy. And in this one, just as it looks kind of fiery. So it's been actually converted into a fire element stone. Working with these clusters can be really effective in a grid. It could be that you want to lay down, and if you lay down and you have one that's kind of flat, it might rest really comfortably on your forehead or up at your pillow. This one is relatively flat too. Yeah, it kind of lays flat. Although at the same time, I'm going to watch my camera angle. I would say you could take a little bit of a cloth. I like to use small little like microfiber cloths, and then set that. Let's say you want this over your upper abdomen because it's very fiery, and that's where one of your fire chakras, that's the solar plexus, the yellow one. You could do that. It could be that you'd like to hold these in your hand and meditate. So that is another way that you can work with the clusters. Here, I wanted to show you an example that sometimes you are going to find clusters that are not part of the quartz family. So this is honey calcite, and this honey calcite is not going to have quite the same clearing and cleansing properties as, in my experience, as the quartz family does. However, this is a beautiful piece to work with as you look at each of these points where the stone forms and sticks out. Those are actually directional pointings of the energy. So you could have any kind of a cluster anywhere in your home, and you could be setting it in a particular place intentionally so that the properties are radiating out into the environment. I don't have one with me, but I have a clear quartz that has a pretty flat base, and it has one very long point, and then the others extend out as well. So again, working with clusters, it may be a small one you're going to work with by holding it in your hands or placing it on or around your body. The larger ones, great for cleansing gemstones and crystals, helping them reset, and bringing in some really strong healing properties into your environment. Okay, so I hope that answered that question. Oh, this is a good question. This actually, I love how these tie together. You've heard me say that before. And just checking chat. Okay. This question is Ametrine a type of amethyst? Are they the same? I think they are. Okay, great question. Okay, I'm going to pull these two clusters back out. So here is the amethyst. Here is the heat-treated or common citrine. So if this particular type of stone, this crystal amethyst, gets heated up while it's still inside under the ground, it's going to be known as natural citrine, not common citrine, okay? The natural citrine has that same fiery energy as the heat-treated or common citrine, yet it took place, that heating took place while it was still in the earth. And that is what we then, when those two stones are really one stone, we end up with what's called ametrine. And I have a piece here. Again, it may be a little hard to see. I'm going to try. So this end is quite purple. So this is still the amethyst. And at this end, particularly, you might be able to see a little bit there. This area was heated while it was still in the ground. So this particular aspect of the stone is natural citrine. And when we find a piece that combines both properties at the same time, that's ametrine. So let's go back to amethyst, very much a upper chakra, the brow, the crown, those higher frequencies where we get those spiritual energies dropping down into our energy field, wind element, lots of inspiration and clarity and kind of things opening up. Then we've got the fire. It's about motivation. It's about activity. It's about abundance. It's about manifestation. And I'm not saying, oh, I wish I had X, Y, or Z. I'm talking about really being in a place where we can manifest at a very high spiritual level and then allow that inspiration to slowly trickle down into our consciousness, our alert and waking consciousness, so that we can then create. And I'd like to give you an example of the manifestation I'm talking about. Let's say that you decide you want to build a house. And I'm just going to throw that out there, even if you think that's kind of a crazy idea. It's a good one. So the first thing you start thinking about is, I wonder where I might want to build that house. And then we start dreaming, I wonder what I'd like that house to look like. What would I like in that house? What shape? How big? How small? What colors? All of those questions that go into actually building a house are the same process that takes place with manifestation. We're starting with the kind of the bigger picture, just kind of the idea, and slowly those ideas form and they take form and they begin to be able to show up in the third dimensional life that we are living. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about manifestation. So we've got spirituality and that high wisdom energy that comes from spirit. And we have the sensibilities and the action of citrine. I would say that is a great way to work with Ametrine because it is both connecting that higher mind with the thinking, processing, manifesting part of our awakened life. So work with that. Again, it could be that you're going to meditate with the stone. It could be that you're going to place it in a grid. It could be that you're going to lay it in particular parts on a particular chakra, or you're going to have this maybe holding it in one hand and you're going to have another stone in the other hand. The beauty of working with gemstones and crystals is that there's no right or wrong way how to do this. I would say the very best thing you could do if you're working, let's say, with this piece of ametrine is to first of all hold it and you start noticing. You start looking at it. You start, I see some fissures there. I see is that a water bubble in there? We start kind of imagining and seeing deeper into the stone, and we allow our mind to let go of preconceived ideas and notions about how a particular stone should be worked with. So I hope that gives you an example. Now there's a question, why is amethyst heated to create common citrine? Do you know when or why this was first done? Great question. There's a part of me that feels like it was discovered by accident. And I feel like in the last few months, I actually was reading about this, and I will explore that and bring that answer, maybe, if I can find something back. To be honest, right now, it is really easy to take a piece of amethyst, which is fairly abundant, and heat it up and become common citrine than it is to slowly go through the process of finding the ametrine within the collection of the quartz, the amethyst, that purple quartz. So that's just my take on it. There are gorgeous pieces and available pieces of ametrine. They're just not that easy to come by. And part of it, I would say, is that even natural citrine itself is harder to come by. When I was actually in Tucson for the gem show last January, February, I went with that on my list, and I was not happy with what I saw available. I'm fairly particular about the vendors I work with. And I was not convinced that the vendors that I was seeing were actually selling natural citrine. And I wondered if indeed it could have been smoky quartz. Smoky quartz can be a very deep brown. It can also be almost straw-like in color. And that is actually often what natural citrine is going to look like. It's going to be pretty straw-like, very, very light tan. So I think it is a quick way, as I have researched how hot this has to get. I believe it's only like 400 or 500 degrees. So it's not like we're putting it into a potter's kiln for an extended period of time. So I will do some more exploring, see if I can find a little bit more about how that happened. But it certainly is really abundant. So if you want natural citrine, be mindful of what you're looking for. You can always reach out to me. Maybe I'll have some luck and be able to find it when I'm out in Denver. Okay, good. I'm glad that helped. And again, I'm sorry I don't have the full answer, but that's the beauty of these Q&As that I do every month, because this is kind of organic. This is about me learning more as you learn more, because as I teach you, I learn more myself about that. So we have a couple more questions, but they can wait. I will definitely reach out to those who have sent those questions in so they know that they can get their answer right away. I think that this has been a really great conversation, and I'm just going to try and recap. First thing we did is we rebuilt the elemental grid so that you could see it, and I apologize again for having botched that. We talked about how crystal healing works. We talked about Larimar, and I will continue to explore if anything else comes up about Larimar, and hopefully I'll have some when I come back from Denver. We talked about grounding stones, which grounding stones can be helpful when traveling that aren't super, super heavy. And so I hope that explained, my explanation helped you understand that the properties of earth element change, and that sometimes we need to be like grounded, and sometimes we simply need that reminder that we're grounded, and we can still be very flexible and moving throughout our day. We talked about Sunstone. We talked about how to work with clusters a little bit more, and then also Ametrine. So I think that is a pretty good representation of the kinds of questions that have been coming in. I really do like that these questions, like the question about, I'm new to all this, how does it work? I love that question, because sometimes I don't even know how it works, but I can tell you it works. And I can tell you, you pick up a stone, you sit down with it and be quiet and just allow yourself to notice the stone and allow it to communicate with you, whether it is a memory, whether it is an image, whether it is a thought, whether it is a feeling, and you just notice what you notice about the stone. That's the stone's energy and your energy at that subtle vibrational level connecting. And science is learning that there's a lot going on when we're talking about energy fields. So perhaps a question will come in a little bit at some point. You notice I always throw those questions out, but I don't just necessarily think of them up myself. But it may be that there's a question about how we can be intentional about exploring what those energetic levels, those various subtle energy fields that we live within and amongst with each other and with our world, how they can be impacted through crystal healing as well. I wanted to remind you that next month, because I will be at the Denver show for a little bit, we are actually going to be reconnecting, and the next Q&A is going to be on Wednesday, September 27th. It's a week later in the month, but that way I can really have time to be able to prepare well and get those questions answered. So let me know if you have questions. Please take a look at the links. I'll have them below this video as well. If you are interested in taking a look at any of my online classes, you're going to be the first to know that I will be running a fall sale towards the end of September, just for a couple weeks, to be able to, again, make it a little bit more accessible for people to be able to study with me. So it's been wonderful. This has been a great opportunity for me to be able to answer questions and get some feedback, and I look forward to next month. For now, I simply wish you many blessings. Be well.